I'm Drea.
I'm Meg.
I'm Tina.
And I'm Jess.
And this is Pardon My Stash. Welcome to Pardon My Stash, a podcast about knitting, the fiber arts, and how awesome it is. Before we dive in today, let's talk about what we're working on. Drea?
I am still plugging away on my Akemi shawl by Isabel Krimmer. I'm using Silver Moon Fiber Arts fingering weight in faded jeans.
It is looking good. Oh, it's so stretchy.
It's
I didn't
very
realize
stretchy.
it was so stretchy.
Oh, yeah. The lace is making it like...
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is real stretchy.
Super springy, so...
That's going to look real cool when it's blocked. I
Yeah.
bet that's going to open up like crazy.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be huge.
Well,
It's already
that's the
probably
perfect
huge,
shawl
but-
is when it's big. Tina?
I can't tell you what I'm working on
Why not?
because it's a secret.
What do you mean it's a secret?
It's a secret, but I can tell you what yarn I'm using.
I was going
What
to say, can
yarn
you
are
at
you
least tell us
using?
the yarn?
It
Oh, I know
is
what you're making.
Lena Grossa Cool Hand-Dyed Limited Edition. It is apparently number 4,738 of 5,000 skeins that were created.
Wow.
Fancy.
That is fancy.
Basically, and there's no like... Of course, there's like no like color name. But basically, it looks like a vanilla cone with rainbow sprinkles.
It
does,
real pretty.
yeah.
I like that.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. And yeah, I'm making a super secret project because I am a masochist.
No,
I'll leave
you
it at
just
that.
like test knitting.
Or are you test knitting?
It's a test.
Oh, I thought you weren't test knitting anymore.
I wasn't.
She lied.
Somebody needed my help.
It's very pretty.
What a sucker.
I am a sucker. It started with me like giving advice and
Yeah.
then it
No.
ended with me helping. So
I remember I was sitting there on the couch with you when you accepted.
I only agreed because it's a flexible deadline and it's super cash and
Yeah.
there's no like crazy like pressure to like do anything. It's
Well,
just
that works.
You know, knit.
It's gonna be a
do
good
your
test.
thing. Yeah. And I really enjoy the stitch, so it'll be fun.
Jess?
I'm working on Square for the Astrid Blanket pattern by Mallory Crawl. And yeah, so I'm just making a whole ton of squares using a bunch of our assorted colors from Critical Hit Dyes because I kind of want to have like a swatch blanket.
Is that crochet?
This is crochet. Yes, it is a crochet. It is a huge hook in
Yeah, I see that.
my experience because I usually work with smaller ones. It's actually probably a decently normal sized hook.
You just
I'm-
like working with tiny
It's-
yarn
I'm
most of
just
the time.
silly.
What size is that? It's like
It's
G,
an
right?
I.
Oh, that's I. Okay, it is
Yeah.
pretty big.
I don't know. It's a 5.5 millimeter.
So that's like a 10 in knitting.
Yeah, that's pretty big.
It's pretty big
It's
needle.
decent size.
Yeah.
So. But yeah, so I'm cranking out a few of these because it's fun and I like crochet and we have all these colors I want to try and do. And I'm just sort of nabbing colors like 3 at a time and going to town at them and just switching out the order in which I use them to make at least 3 squares. But if you use 3 colors and switch them around, you can make 6 different squares just using those 3 colors.
I've never made a granny square, but
It's fun. I never did till yesterday. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
It really is.
I didn't realize there were so many kinds of granny squares now. Like, because when my grandmother did it was basically just your kind of box one, and it was still like 2 to 3 colors, but it was basically just squares within a square. And I really like this round puff one. So
I never crocheted along anything in my life until yesterday, and she showed me how to do that along with the video tutorial. And that one square, I learned 6 different techniques
nice.
in that one square. And it was really like, when I say I learned them, you repeat them enough that you memorize them. So that was like an amazing square to start with because like flat out now I'm like, okay, cool. I know what single chain is, double chain, half. What is it? Half double
Half double
I don't
crochet.
even know what any of these things are, but I know how to do them. So it was really neat, like how many techniques could be crammed into one little square.
at some point I should show you flat just so you know what they are. But
Just like, okay, this is a half double crochet, so you're gonna put this here, you're gonna do this, and do this, and I'm like, okay.
But
and
I
I just
did it.
kept following her, but you repeat it enough that you actually do learn them. So it's a really good square to start with.
One day I'll let you teach me how to crochet, Jess. Not today,
not
but
this
maybe one day.
She's been saying for years that she's a bad teacher, and she's really not
I'm bad
at all.
teacher.
No,
I
you're
feel
really
like
not.
you've taught me stuff.
You're really not a bad teacher.
What are you working on, Meg?
I'm still working on Ocean Stones by Greta Menson. I have not worked on it in a while. I kind of put it down. I got lured by other projects, color work, crochet. It's a great project right now for like just sitting and going like randomly, because it's very, like I said, repetitive. So I didn't need my pattern or anything like that. I can just sit down and go. Be sure to check out our website, pardonmystash.com, for more information as well as pictures regarding our current projects, patterns, and yarns. This week, for our main topic, we are going to be talking about misconceptions about the fiber arts and how do we debunk them. What are some of the things that people think, say, or do when you mention that you partake in the fiber arts, and how do you deal with it? Thoughts?
Knitting is for old people.
We brought knitting to Connecticut. I think it was 2009, and Jackie said we were old lady level grinding.
Yes.
And I thought that was the funniest
greatest
thing ever, because I had never heard of level grinding before, because I didn't play video games. And I think, Jess, you had to explain it to me what it meant.
Yes.
And it was just so funny. She saw us take out our stuff, and she's like, oh, time for some old lady level grinding. And yeah, it was like, okay, knitting's for old ladies. You know, what's really funny right now, I don't think I know any old ladies that knit, like personally. Like, I know of old ladies that knit, but I don't know, like, there is no older lady in my life that I can think of,
Who currently
anybody that I would
knits.
consider really old that knits. Yeah.
My grandmother does, but she was convinced. She thought I was doing some new age knitting because I wasn't knitting Portuguese, and now that I've switched to Portuguese knitting, she's like, "Oh, so you do? Oh, okay."
New age knitting.
Oh, so
Yeah.
you do know how to knit the right way.
Yeah, no, she just kept giving me like these looks of like, why are you doing that to yourself? Whenever I was throwing the yarn, and she's just like, that looks so painful. Like, just stop. And then I switched, and then she was like, oh, okay, yeah, that's how you're supposed to do it. But yeah, she will do it. If I put put a pair of needles in her hand, like I gave her a crochet hook the other day and some yarn because my daughter was doing it, and she just whipped up. It was like a lace border, no pattern, just done. Like it was nothing.
Okay, so that's one old.
That's the
old
one
person
old lady
I know.
you know.
Yeah, I really don't know that many older people that are knitting. I really don't.
Yeah, everybody that I know personally that is knitting or crocheting, they're all about our age.
I have one coworker who's older than me by about 15 years that is knitting, but I wouldn't consider her old. My kids would.
Wow, that's different. That's a different problem.
But yeah, I think that's one. It's like it's an old person activity, and I really think that that's not even the case anymore. I think that it kind of got a rap for being like an old person activity, but it really isn't anymore. Most of the people you see at yarn stores knitting are not that old.
Well, certain ones still have like a couple of those. That older crowd. But
Yeah.
I would say it's probably because the social medias and all that have the young kids out there.
Well,
those
retro
whippersnappers.
is in.
Yeah, it's like it's like cool right now to knit. Like it's the cool, uncool thing to do. You know, like how I found that like there's this trend right now with like, oh, I'm so uncool. I do this. That's how uncool I am, and like that makes you cool.
Is that
I don't
a
know if that
trend?
makes sense.
That's
but
a
like,
trend now?
I don't know. Like I see people like embracing, like they want to be considered like nerds of something, or they have hobbies or they whatever, and they just like want to hop on this train. And I'm like, I mean, that's cool, but like you should do it because you like it, not because it's some train to hop on, you know? And I think that a lot of the misconceptions that we're seeing actually comes from either people who don't do it, which we already know, and then like people who jump on the train and then go, wow, this is not what I thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
You know, I don't think I've met that many people, though. That I think there are like maybe two that asked to be taught to knit and actively did not
Didn't
do it
do it.
afterwards. They were both guys.
Yep.
Yeah, you know exactly what I'm talking about, don't
do.
you? Yeah, and like one of them is I don't really know his feelings about the fiber arts at all anymore. The other one has high respect for it, but ripped out his knitting 3 times and was like, yeah, this is not for me.
He does blacksmithing now.
Yeah, he does other stuff. He does other stuff.
If you were wondering, he still crafts, just
Yeah,
different.
He does
Different
tons of crafts, but he's not. He doesn't knit. but those are like literally the only two people that ever were like, hey, I want to knit, and then never picked it up again after that one time. Most of the people that I know who asked to knit eventually settled down and did knit, even if they only do like
Little projects.
1 or 2 projects a year.
There were a couple people that I taught to knit, and I'm pretty sure they're still knitting, even though I'm not really in contact with them anymore.
Yeah. Well, I think it's got a lot going for it. I think that, when people do it, it's like once you get the muscle memory, it's like, oh, this actually is pretty relaxing, and it gives me something to do while I'm watching TV and, all of that. So it's definitely not just for old people. Spinster ladies. We are all spinster ladies. I feel like that goes along with like, people who say like people who play D&D are like terminally single and never get dates. And I don't think I've met a single like person in D&D that didn't have a significant other, and
At least at
most
some
of them
point.
met significant others through D&D. Like,
Yeah.
No, I've definitely met.
but you know what I'm saying?
But
Like,
it's not all of them.
and it's not
It's
the
a lot of
majority.
them.
Look, when we were doing D&D, like our campaign, everybody at our table was either married or in a long-term committed relationship or...
Yeah.
I would say we're not the norm, though. Like, if you go to like a PAX East or something where they're doing a whole bunch of those games all at once,
But we could be.
there's a lot of dungeon dwellers in there.
I think that's the point, is that you don't know. I mean, there could be a lot of women who are spinsters. I hate that term. Who are knitters, but I also think that like most people who are doing fiber arts are in whatever position they're in because they want to be, whether they're choosing to be in a relationship or be single or whatever. But it's not like
You're a spinster, therefore you should be doing crafts.
right. I have nothing else to do with my life because there's not a man in it, so I have to be knitting. Like that's ridiculous. I think most people are wherever they're at, whether they're in a relationship or not, by choice, because that's where they choose to be at this moment in time.
I got one.
All right.
People who assume that if you're somewhat decent at the craft, then therefore you must be selling or donating said craft.
Oh my God.
You couldn't just be doing it to do it. Like, that's a huge, like, the amount of people that come up to me and go like, hey, sell it. And I'm like, no.
Yeah. And
don't
I know
wanna
that
be
we've talked
hustling.
about that before,
Yeah.
but I feel like it's
definitely
very
a
relevant.
misconception.
and it's very prevalent in crafting. If you're crafting, therefore you should be selling it.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's also a double-edged sword too, because nobody asks you to like make them something if you are making it look like you are having difficulty with it. They ask you to do something when they think, wow, you are making that look so easy. So for you to make me a sweater, that's going to be like nothing for you, right?
Oh, I hate that one.
So it's like the double-edged sword of, wow, I'm saying this because you look like you really have your you-know-what together and you are doing a really good job and you're just like flying through that knitting. But on the flip side of it, it's like, yes, and it took me a very long time to get to this point.
Yeah.
And that does not mean that sweaters are falling off of me while I walk. Like,
Well, going along with that, there's also this idea that what you hand custom make is going to cost the same as Wally World.
Wally World.
yeah, you can't just go down to Walmart and pick up what you're creating with your own hands.
It's like, yes, you could get a knit sweater at Walmart for like $28, sure, but that's not talking to a single person who probably has other stuff going on the side that's getting all the materials and taking all the time to custom make and custom build this sized object for you.
And they're also not, those Wally World sweaters are not going to be seamless top-down sweaters. I'll tell you that right now. They're going to be seamed. They're going to be machine knit for the most part. And not that there's anything wrong with that, but like when I say machine knit, not hand cranked, like
As
those
in factory,
industrial
Yeah.
knitting machines just cranking out sheets of fabric and then that's being sewn by somebody that's probably not getting paid enough. And then, sent to your local Walmart and you're like, $28. Come on. Why can't you give me that 32 per skein dollar merino superwash
seen
sweater?
So
in a
many
3X.
crafter horror stories about their DMs with like, well, I'd like to do this, and then they give a price estimate, and they're like, what? No, I could get this at Walmart. It's like, okay, so go.
So go. Like, enjoy. Please enjoy.
I feel like I have no energy to argue with people like that. And
I feel like I would,
don't
only I'm
want
not
to.
going to.
You know, I did find a good way to get around that conversation. You tell them that you're booked up for the next year. Yeah, I'm just so good.
Just
just
can't.
booked up. If you want, you can give me your email and I'll put it on a wait list, and then you pretend to type their email in and then you walk away. Like, because they won't remember you a year from now, especially if it's a stranger just coming up to you and saying that. Like, it's so easy. Oh wow! Oh yeah, I'm gonna make 56 sweaters in the next year, and I just can't fit another one. It's just so much time.
Tina, that's like more than one sweater a week.
If they were baby chunky sweaters, I bet you could do it. It would be really, really
I
tough,
feel
but I
like,
bet you could.
I bet you could.
I bet if it's a baby sweater in chunky, you could.
You know what?
You could make
like
that
dog
happen.
sweaters. You know?
Yeah, if you don't got to do arms, just knit a tube with holes.
Yeah.
There you go. I actually have one kind of piggyback off of that, and I find this is interesting because it's even among other crafters a complete misconception about the cost of materials.
Yeah.
So my mom and I were talking like about a month ago about, and my mom said something about, you know, when she dies, and I brought this up before, my mother's crazy quilting stash, like all the fabric, and she goes, well,
yes.
you know, when I die, you know, my sister's going to get all my fabric, but if she goes first, then you need to get rid of it. And I'm like, oh, Jesus. And she goes, but don't worry, it's worth a lot of money. You can sell it. And I go, okay, but Mom, I need you then to tell me what it's worth, because I have no clue what you paid for it. And she, you know, she started acting like I was nuts because I had no idea. And I said, okay, let me ask you a question. How much do you think a skein of fingering weight, which hilarious, she wouldn't know what that meant, fingering weight hand dyed yarn? And I'm like, no. And I told her what, you know, Jess and I charge at Critical Hit, and she's like, and people pay that? And I said, yes, Mom. And we're actually like pretty middle of the road as far as indie dyers go. And she wasn't trying to be disrespectful or anything like that. It just literally had never crossed her mind that was the amount of money. So when somebody is like, will you knit me a sweater? It's like, okay, so base price, if I buy the yarn, even if I use cheap yarn, we're looking at like $60 base price for just the yarn.
Right. Yeah.
And then add on everything else. And I think, you know, even people who just don't do fiber arts in general, they have no idea what the actual materials cost.
I swear, if one more person says, well, it's just yarn.
It's like, guys, a lot goes into yarn.
But you can say that about literally every hobby.
can.
I know.
Every hobby.
Guys,
like,
it's just paint.
Well, that's what. It's not just paint.
when you told me what Coptic markers were like cost, and I was like, you have got to be freaking kidding me that markers cost that much. But that's what I mean.
Yeah, but Copic markers are like the best.
But it doesn't matter. I had no idea.
Yeah.
Like, this is me who can't draw. And she's telling me like, what's one marker? Like,
Anywhere from like $4 to $8,
yeah,
maybe higher,
like
depending.
what? I was like, you've got to be kidding me. The
thought that was a
cost
peg.
of that,
No.
right? No, I would have said the same thing.
No, I have paid that much for a single Copic
Yeah,
marker.
and if you are like, if you really, you know, are trying to use the best of the best, which, you know, if you're enjoying your craft and you're going to use it, like, by all means, you should buy whatever you want to. But people aren't going to understand that, wow, I really do want to buy this $60 skein of cashmere silk blend. And they're going to be like, that's literally string.
Yeah.
Yes,
Well,
it is.
There's always going to be somebody.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Like your different types of paints, or even going from like, okay, like miniature paints, like, you know, those tiny little bottles that I also pay like
Oh,
$6
yeah.
for, that are usually like acrylic. They are not the same as the tube acrylics that
No.
you can get, which is also not the same as the kids' acrylic paint that
No.
you can get. They're all like different,
different
pigments.
levels. Yep.
So, but if you don't know anything about paint, you're just like, dude, it's a tiny ass jar of paint. I can get like one for
$1.
an eighth
Yeah.
of that price. That's like 6 times more. And it's like, yeah, but
It's the wrong kind.
But my super special crafting stuff that I
it's
want to
different.
use. It is. And people don't. And the same thing with the tools. I mean, my mom was asking me a couple of years ago, like, she wanted to buy me some nice needles, and she asked me what kind I liked, and I told her my favorites are the carbons.
Yeah.
And she saw the price and she was like, oh my God. Like, they're not cheap. And it is. It's like, yeah, I could go to Joann's and I could buy a whole bunch of clovers that are perfectly good. They're going to get the job done exactly the same way. I'm not going to enjoy the feel experience as much, but they'll do the job just as well. But somebody that, would you spend, $20 on one pair of needles as opposed to like, $4 on the same size that will do the exact same job. So,
Yeah.
And I think that also plays into the whole like how much it should cost, because there's the overhead cost of everything. Yes, there's the yarn, and yes, there's your time, but then like all your materials and notions and accessories and winders and swifts and like all this stuff that you used with it is like cost too. And yeah.
right. And you'll have people that are like, why would you ever buy a ball winder? You have two perfectly good hands. Just wind the yarn. And that I say, no.
No.
Because I've done it. I will absolutely like, I
also
try.
wash laundry down by the river, but I mean...
There's a lot of stuff that I'm like, you know what? I could live without this. I don't wind balls by hand anymore. Absolutely not.
I'm sorry, I got that Chris Farley thing where you could go live in a van down by the river. Anyway, yeah.
But you know what? There are people that would be like, why would you spend your time doing that? Like,
That's true of any hobby.
right. It is. And that's a ridiculous cost and you shouldn't do it.
Well, besides cost, I think there's also a misconception of the type of things that you can knit, like
Sweaters and scarves.
yeah,
And socks. That's it.
Yeah,
That's
like,
it.
or it could be
No.
honestly any of those things. Like I've heard people tell me like, "Oh, I thought you only like did like hats and socks or scarves," and I'm like, "It's always scarves. Scarves are always in
Oh,
there."
yeah, I would say
but then
scarves
like,
is the-
but then like it'll always change. Like it'll be like a sweater, and when they say a sweater, like they're thinking of like those Fair Isle, like Celtic, like
the
gorgeous
snowflakes and,
detailed sweaters, and I'm just like, yeah, but like, there's also like crop tops and halters and mini skirts and apparently pants and like and pants. Yeah, I don't want to do pants, but there is pants.
The chainmail in Monty Python was
Yes.
actually
Yeah.
knit.
I sent that to you the other day.
Really? I saw it on TikTok.
Can you
the other
imagine
day.
walking around with all that metal?
Exactly.
And die. It's
Well,
terrible.
Dude,
not
your
just that,
sound people
It was
are
too
like-
loud.
Yeah, clank, clank, clank. That's annoying.
Yeah, I brought that up just because when I made my husband's high vis cowl, I had gotten a comment of like, you could use colors like that, and I'm like, yeah.
Only gray.
Yeah, like, what did you like?
Neutrals.
No, like, I don't know if they had the idea of like it has to like whatever the colors on the sheep. That's all we can work with. Like, there's no such thing as dyeing it. And I'm like, so then I'm sitting there in my brain like, do you think that there's blue sheep, or like that they're like?
No, it's
I
like
don't
you
know.
gotta get the blue dye and just chuck it at a sheep, and then they have blue wool all the time.
Now that's just Minecraft at that point. If anyone plays
the
Minecraft,
secrets.
you make the sheep mate, and then they have a baby with a different color. That's
Yeah.
how you get different colored yarn in Minecraft.
You need to know color theory. It's super important.
Anyways,
And then you can make carpets.
yeah, and different color beds.
And it's cool. Like, dyeing hasn't been around for thousands of years or anything like that. But we're just gonna knit with the same
I
sheep.
think people are so removed from it. Like, because it's at this point, if you need something, you buy it. There's like, it's not as, I think the whole, another just misconception is just the idea of patiently making something.
Making stuff.
Like, crafting something with your own hands. And I think anyone that's a crafter can relate to that. Like, I've heard like, well, why didn't you just go buy a sweater on Amazon? Well, why don't you just go buy a cupboard on whatever for someone who's a woodworker, or like, but like maybe they don't want to.
Maybe I want to make this sweater more poorly, and I want to spend like $150 to make it
Yeah.
for the glory of having made it.
I'm not
Did
gonna
you ever
lie.
think of
I
that?
never think about my own personal cost. Like if I'm making something for myself, it's like, well, I have this yarn.
It just happens to be here.
But I will never sit there and tally how expensive
Oh no!
something is.
You know what? It just makes me
Unless
think
somebody
of
is
like
asking me if they
Well,
could buy it
yeah.
off of
Right.
my person while
Right.
while I'm standing in a post office.
That meme of why would I spend $15 on pad thai when I can spend $92 on ingredients to make a shittier pad thai? It just makes me think about that. More of it. And you know what? Then I also get the joy of having made it. Like, yes,
true.
if I want a sweater that fits perfectly, I can go to the store and I can buy a sweater and whatever. Or I can make it and be super proud of it, even though it's a little wonky and I totally like fudged the armpit holes. Don't say you haven't done it. You have all done it.
all done it.
You have all done it. And you know what? I'm super proud of that sweater, even though the hem is a little bit wonky. Like, you know what? That's my choice.
I see your point, but I will disagree that I'm making it worse because at this point, the store-bought stuff does not fit me as well as my handmade stuff.
And there is that too. Like,
Because
you're
I
making
can-
it custom to your
'cause,
size.
Like I can make adjustments for darts for my boobs. I can make short rows for the back of my neck so it doesn't ride. I can like change the collar height so I'm comfortable with it. Cause like a lot of times I'll be like, this is great and this is great in a store-bought sweater, but it's like cleavage galore and I'm not comfortable with that because I'm heavy chested. Or it's like, you know,
You can change the sleeves to be more comfortable or
I can
flattering.
make them 3/4 instead of full because the
Right.
full makes me uncomfortable.
Right.
Or I can make it a short sleeve if I just feel like it. Or like,
Or you can Frankenstein pattern.
Yeah.
Nobody is sitting
yeah.
here saying that buying off, like making a sweater is easier than buying a sweater.
Absolutely
Like
not.
nobody
No.
is saying that, but we're not talking
No.
about ease. We're talking about crafting.
I think it's like a better outcome. Like, I just feel like I'm going to invest this time. And the reason why it's worth it is because in the end, I would rather have 2 or 3 sweaters that fit me amazingly in my whole life than 20 of them that I all hate because they're either too short or too tight or too this or too that, like, because they're not made to my body.
Right.
So it's yeah, it is time. It does cost extra money, but if I went to somebody and said, "Hey, I want you to make this beautiful, intricate sweater custom to my measurements," heck yeah, you should be paying hundreds of dollars.
Yeah.
That is insane to expect. Like a machine knit sweater is in an average size that might fit the majority of the populace. So if that doesn't fit you well and you want something custom, even if it was fabric, even if you're a sewer, even if like it doesn't matter, you want something custom to you, that's money. That's like it's
Yeah,
expensive.
And you also
yeah.
can't find that in many places.
No.
You're very rarely going to find someone that will make you clothing custom fit to your exact measurements from the ground up.
Yeah, and usually the reach for that is very low because people don't have access to those people because they actually charge what they're worth.
Yeah.
But like other than that, so the option is if you don't have millions of dollars at your disposal to just throw around willy-nilly, like, you know, so many of us do. Anyways, you can just get the materials, eat the cost of the materials, which even if you not necessarily can afford $32 skeins of yarn, maybe you can afford $5 skeins of yarn, and that's fine. And maybe because like I know with us, we're all on the larger spectrum of sizes, and that we are not making extra smalls or smalls. So we're not looking at 4 or 5 skeins of yarn. We're looking at 9, 10, 11 skeins of yarn to make a sweater for ourselves. And so, yeah maybe it'll be easier to eat $50 of yarn rather than like $150 of yarn, you know?
That's the one bonus of fingering weight.
Yeah.
I did my whole sweater in 3.5 skeins.
That's kind of nice.
I know. You never get that. Like
But-
if I did that
but-
worsted, it would be like 12.
Right. Right. But then it's all a balance of what you're willing to give up, right? So are you pay a
It
little
took
bit
me
more.
a lot longer.
Yeah.
And then it goes faster,
Yep.
but
It took me longer.
It's all give and take, and
Right.
but that's the beauty of crafting. You can make all those customizations. If you need a certain price point, a certain fit, a certain this, a certain that, every single
can do
measure
them.
is customizable for you. Which like brings us back full circle to misconceptions of all of it is just this idea that it's just this one vertical of like, this is what knitting is, when it's such a huge spectrum of things. If there's anything I've learned is just like, if you feel like you want to be a designer of like cat beds, like you can do that, because guess what? There's a niche for that, and probably, and even if there's 8 other people doing that, no one's doing your type of cat bed, so you are like even though that's oddly specific, you definitely like you can like it's just that's the beauty with crafting. It's because it's your artistic expression.
Everyone has their own style.
Yeah, maybe somebody will like it, or maybe you just want to make it for yourself, and that's fine. And your
My cats would
fine
never.
beds.
No, they wouldn't. They would look at them. They would not use them. You could make them the most gorgeous cat bed. Back me up on this, Dre. You could make them the most gorgeous bed, or buy them the most gorgeous bed, and they will look at it and be like, no.
But I will sit on this single sheet of paper that I see you dropped on the floor.
Or this pizza box that you left on the table. Yes, but I'm not sitting in that custom-made cat bed. Like, no, hell no. That's not happening.
That's how I feel. Like I started making my dog Barlow a doggy sweater, but every time I put anything remotely on him that goes anywhere but off of his collar, he's rolling.
not having it.
He's rolling around. He's like, get this off of me. So I was like, I've been like,
You're like, it's not even worth it.
yeah.
Well, that's like when I put bow ties on the cats. They did not like that. And this was the first year that I tried to do that to them. And one is 10, and I think the other one's going to be 7 this year. And they're like,
They're like, Mom, I don't know where you got this idea, but we ain't those type of cats.
no, you got to start that young.
Yeah.
I have another one that I think, Jess, you can probably debunk in a way that I think the rest of us probably can't. But I think there's the prevailing notion that crochet is easier than knitting.
Yes and no. On the one hand, you have the single strand, so you don't have to worry about like stitches getting dropped. It's a little bit easier to pick them back up. Like I said, it tends to go faster once you get the muscle memory down. I find that crochet goes a lot faster than knitting. Patterns for crochet are god awful to read if you don't know what you're looking at. Like if you open, I'm not talking about the written ones. The written ones are about the same as a knitted one, so long as you know the acronym and whatever, you're fine. The pictures are tough. Sometimes they don't put a key in, and if you don't know where your designer is from, you have no idea, because every country has their own symbolism for stuff. Let me tell you, a peacock stitch apparently has 12 different ones.
Wow.
And it took me forever to figure out which one on a pattern I was doing at one point. Like, I was like, I don't know what this is. I'm like, oh, it's a peacock, which is a super simple stitch, and I had no idea what it was. But yeah, so there's that. There's learning how to read a crochet chart. Crochet also, you can't, like, it's man-made only. You can't replicate crochet with machinery. So if you see a crochet project that is handmade by someone somewhere, machines can't do it. They can do stuff that's kind of similar, but like braiding and whatnot, but it is not the same.
I find that really interesting that with all the technology we have in the world,
Yeah,
we have never managed to come up with a machine crochet.
I think it's just the way you do crochet, because there is a lot of
Nuance to it.
Wrist movement.
Yeah.
Well, there's wrist movement, and there's going back and forth on, like, it's not just like a linear all the way around or a back and forth. Like, you will go like
Up, down, sideways.
up, down, sideways, around, then back around halfway, then back around the whole way. Like there's a lot of back and forth. So for some patterns. So I think crochet and knitting are very similar in how you pick them up and how you learn them, but they're also very different. Like, just because you know knitting, you're not going to be able to look at a crochet chart and be like, yes, I have this right off the bat, because they're very different techniques. However, I think if you learn knitting, you can learn crochet, and if you learn crochet, you can learn knitting. Like, I do think once you have a love for doing a fiber craft like that, you can pick it up if that's what you like. And a lot of people have preferences. At the end of the day, they're like, yeah, you know what, I found out that I like, I've knitted forever, but I really like crochet better. And then you have the vice versa.
I was going to say too, a really obvious misconception is when people are like, knitting is crochet, and like crochet is knitting. And you're like,
It's all the same thing, Tina.
It's all the
same thing.
Oh my God.
I feel also that cross stitchers and embroiderers also have this feud.
Oh, I'm sure.
I only because I knew I have a friend that I knew in North Carolina that did cross stitch. Yeah, she did cross stitch, But yeah, I feel that happens a lot where like you'll just be knitting along and someone's like, wow, my grandmother used to crochet too. And I'm like, that's cool. That's not what I'm doing.
I don't know if you guys remember like a million years ago, like did the quilted Northern commercials where they had the old ladies quilting and they were quilting the toilet paper. And my mother would like lose her mind every time because they were quilting with knitting needles. And she's like, that's not a thing.
Yeah, that was
you don't
so
quilt
weird.
with knitting needles. And somebody finally must have said something because then he switched and they were using
they
they were hand sewing. And she's like, okay, you also, most people aren't going to like hand stitch a quilt, but you know what? Fine. Like we're not
Like,
going to
whatever.
we're not going to mince hairs anymore.
What
like
was
It was
that?
it's
Insurance
the Liberty
commercial.
Mutual,
Yes.
and they had the two guys, and I was all excited about this.
yeah,
It was
yeah.
two guys, and they were all excited about knitting. It was
were
knitting,
knitting.
and they were pulling up crocheted finished objects, and I'm like,
Yeah,
that's
it was
crocheted
really weird.
items. It was like a crocheted bear, and you're like, that's not knit.
So to recap, just do your crafts the way that you want to do your crafts, and when people give you a shout it, just
put on your hater blockers.
yeah,
Hater blockers.
I just said that. That was a sentence I just said.
yeah.
Hater blockers.
Put on your hater blockers.
I'm not going to cut that out.
Don't. Proud of it. That's it for this week's topics. For additional content and opportunities to connect with the cast, check out our Patreon or our website at pardonmystash.com. Be sure to tune in next week for more fun, friends, and fiber at Pardon My Stash.